Hello, I'm Hugh Coakley from the Guildford Dragon News, and we're here today in the Guildford Institute, and thanks to the Guildford Institute for allowing us to use the room, and we're talking to three people who are candidates for the local elections for Guildford Borough Council in May, and we will be discussing the proposed North Street development, which is only a stone's throw from where we're sitting. So, thank you first for giving up your time. We know you're very busy. Could I ask you first to briefly introduce yourselves, who you are hoping to represent, and your particular interest in the North Street development? John first.
I'm John Rigg. I'm standing as a candidate for the Residents for Guildford and Villages group. We've quite a few people standing this time. I am not the chairman. The chairman of our group is Joss Bigmore. But my particular interest is in the built environment. I'm chair of Guildford Vision Group and have been actively campaigning for better development on North Street for many years.
Carol?
I'm Caroline Reeves. I'm standing as a candidate for Friary and St Nicholas Ward, which is the town centre ward, and North Street is in the ward. I've represented the ward for the last 12 years. And obviously have been very keen to see that North Street is developed in a well-designed, appropriate manner for the area that it's in.
Okay. Jeff?
I'm Jeffrey Davis. I am standing as a candidate in the Holy Trinity Ward, where I'm already a councillor. I'm representing the Conservative Party, and currently my role in Guildford Borough Council is lead councillor for North Street.
Okay. So just to give a flavour of the development for our listeners who may not know about it, it's a huge development, 3.5 hectares, a North Street site. It's bounded by Commercial Street, North Street and Lee Pale Road. The council has said that it is to be primarily residential and will include a new bus station. Work has started to clear the site. It's been partially derelict for many years, but they're actually working on it now. And we understand that the developer has submitted a pre-application submission. Now, the question, and to yourself first, Karen, given that Solom obtained permission on appeal for a development that was not well received locally, I think that the council rejected it as well as people in general, of the railway station, are you fearful that there's going to be another unpopular development foisted upon the town?
With the state of planning at the moment, that is always a problem, because we've seen a lot of rather odd decisions by planning inspectors where, as a planning committee, we've refused something and that decision has been overturned. I would hope that if we've got a really well thought out, good design that meets all the criteria, then there should not be a reason for a planning inspector to overturn our decision if we approve it. But who knows at the moment? Even the planning inspector at the hearing for the local plan recently said that planning in this country was in rather a strange state. So I'm afraid I wouldn't put my money on anything at the moment.
So, Caroline, if that's your fear, what do you think the council can do about it?
Well, we have to have the best possible plan.
Okay.
It's quite simple.
Okay. John?
Well, I think that's absolutely impossible, actually, because the council own half the site, or a proportion of the site. So they have no need whatsoever to agree to any scheme they don't like. It's as simple as that. If you own parts of the site and the scheme is going on the whole development over the whole of the land owned by M&G, the existing owner, and the land owned by the council, they simply cannot develop this. So we've got no problem at all. We can require exactly the scheme we want.
But what fears do you have for the development?
Well, I think there are two fears. One is that the quality of the development is not good enough for Guildford. And unfortunately, for decades now, we've seen very, very poor development in Guildford. Nobody's thrilled with anything, and the largest scheme, the Solom scheme, is a disaster of our own, partly of our own making. But the scheme should be a high quality. I am somewhat pleased to hear that the developer's going to be a subsidiary of Berkeley Homes, who definitely can deliver high quality. Doesn't mean necessarily they will. We've still got a lot of work to do. But the other concern is viability. It's got to be a viable scheme, and of course the...
I think we'll come to that.
Okay.
John, sorry to...
That's right.
Jeff, your fears for the scheme?
I don't have any fears at all. All I feel is overwhelming optimism. Let me set down a few basic things, having heard what John said there. The council owns just under 20% of the site, not half, just under 20%. So we are the junior partner, you could say. The 80% is owned by M&G Insurance. M&G Insurance have an established joint venture with a company called St Edwards, who are part of the Berkeley Group. Both parties are still in a lockout agreement under the previous retail scheme. That has expired and both parties are holding over. Okay.
Very technical stuff, Jeff.
Yes, sorry, but what it means is that we can't negotiate in the free market. We are tied together at the moment until somebody changes it with M&G. As it happens, and I feel very pleased by this, M&G have this joint venture company with Berkeley, who I've known for at least 40 years professionally, and have the highest regard for Berkeley.
Jeff, is there a design brief for the development?
We have only received in the council so far a document which is a pre-app. We haven't got as far as a pre-app yet.
But isn't the design brief something that should be driven by the town?
It will be. I could come on some timings here. We are on track to agree the position by May. The whole process, including the grant of planning consent, should be all done by June 2020, that's next year, and the start on site is scheduled for October 20. Okay, so we've got the heights and views study in, and so big progress has been made. I've only been the lead councillor for 2 or 3 months, and I think already you've seen surfacing of North Street, which I'm chuffed about, and some demolitions, which is a big tidying up. So we are making very fast progress now, and I'm very pleased. I have no fears at all, and the main point is that from June this year, for some months, there will be a public consultation.
Okay.
And that will be run by Berkeley, and everybody will have every opportunity to say their piece.
So a public consultation from June?
Correct, for some months.
So, John, the scheme changed from being retail-led to being primarily residential in January. There was an announcement by the council. So how much affordable housing do you think should be in the new development?
Well, the council set a target for affordable housing, and they will be obliged to reach that target. I think it's currently the debate between 30 and 40%. The most developers now try to say, well, the scheme isn't viable with this degree of affordable homes. So what they actually do, they try and negotiate the percentage down, which of course they're quite expert at doing. It will be a big debate. That will be something which will affect viability, and I'm concerned we shouldn't kill the golden goose, the goose that lays the golden egg. It's something you have to do carefully, and you need a degree of expertise.
Okay, Jeff, same question. So what we're talking about is how much affordable housing would you like to see in the new development?
The scheme that's been provided so far on the pre-app, which is not a public document yet and won't be public until the basic deal is done between the council and St Edwards, shows a mixture of homes, quite a good proportion of affordable.
How much?
I'm not at liberty to say because it's part of the document.
The local plan talks about 40%.
Yeah, well, there's obviously an aspiration towards that, but the more, and John's already touched on this, and we're both chartered surveyors, we know a bit about development, the more affordable you put in, the more pressure you've got on the viability, and the more the viability goes down, the more pressure there'll be to make it bigger.
It sounds to me, the local plan talks about 40% if appropriate. It sounds to me like there's a bit of wriggling going on.
Well, developers aren't charities. Developers have to make a profit to make this work. We must keep on track. We must make this thing viable, and we must make it happen. And that's what I've been absolutely flat out on for the last few months.
Karen, same question. How much affordable housing should go in North Street development?
As much as possible, as everyone has said. The problem is always viability, and that's why the previous schemes for North Street have failed, because although they were approved at planning and they were retail schemes, they weren't viable, and so they haven't been built out. We can't fall into that hole again. You know, we must have a scheme that works, and as people have said, 30 or 40% in our local plan. We must strive for that.
Your manifesto says that Lib Dems want a minimum of 40% affordable housing in all new developments.
Yeah.
No caveats.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
North Street, do you think that's 40% is achievable?
Well, as Jeff said, the developers aren't charities. Yes, that is what we would strive for. That is why we think it's really important across the whole of the borough, not just in the town centre, because that level of affordable homes is needed everywhere, not just in the urban area.
But it does sound to me that your manifesto is not necessarily achievable because of this affordability, viability aspect.
But you have to have something to strive for. You can't say, oh, okay, we'll just go with 20% and then everybody wins.
Okay.
We need to have something positive to strive for.
Okay. Right, Jeff, should it go ahead, and no doubt it will, the aesthetics of the new town centre building, including the height, will be really important for the town's appearance. And many feel that the track record for getting a widely appreciated architecture is quite poor. We've had some shocking examples over the years. It will be with us for a long time to come. This isn't a sort of, not here for 5 years, it will be here for a long time. What do you think are the key visual criteria for the look of the development, and how will the public be consulted on this so they can actually make a difference?
Well, I've certainly looked at a number of Berkeley schemes, and I'm always impressed with them. I like their placemaking, I like the fact they create squares, I like their public art, and as far as height is concerned, as it will come back to the residual valuation, which is part of the viability that we're just discussing. We must make this happen this time. Guildford cannot afford to have any more failures on this subject, which has been at least 20 years, and Caroline will probably tell me longer than that. So we've got to succeed this time, we've got to make this happen. Now, as far as height is concerned, I'm not on the planning committee. Caroline is, I'm not. All I would say is it's got to have some scale to get in to make the viability work. Personally, we've only talked about affordable housing. I think there should be a range of other kinds of housing, and I've got my own pet hobby horse, which is actually upmarket flats as well, which would free up some large houses on the outside of Guildford. And I think there is a market for people of my age, that's 70 plus, who would like to live right in the town centre in a sustainable location.
Okay. So council leader is on record saying that it will be 9 stories high. Is that acceptable?
We've got to remember that the site is very varied topographically, and the lower part, at the bottom of North Street, you could get considerably more stories in there than you can at the end that's nearer Leapale Lane. I don't know. It depends. A lot of it depends on what we see. I've seen absolutely nothing on this at all.
What do you think should be the key visual criteria for the development?
It's got to be open. It mustn't be a closed residential development. It must have footpaths through it, places where people can cycle through. We know from the meetings that we had with M&G when it was going to be a retail development that that's something that people who live in the town centre think is really important. And in terms of the consultation, it must be people who live in the area, not the usual suspects who always comment on these sorts of things.
How will you get people to do that?
By having consultations in the area, so where I live, actually inviting people to a local area to come and look and discuss what's going to...
But we do need a wider consultation, because it's our town centre, not just those who live here.
It
who
is.
live in the town.
But very often it's the people who don't live in the town centre who are the most vocal, and they're not necessarily the people who will be either living there, walking through there, using it to get to other shops in town.
John?
Well, I, like Jeff, think we need some high-quality apartments in there. I'll be looking to downsize as well and live in the town centre, and I want to feel consulted. and I think everybody else who's voting in Guildford will want to feel consulted on such an important issue. We've watched the council have 8 failed attempts over decades on this. It's been a disgrace, really, and it ought to be open and it ought to be transparent process. Already we've got a brief, we haven't got a brief, but we've got a developers pack which no one's seen, and we're talking about a process, Jeff was saying, for next June. Decide in haste, regret at leisure. It needs to be done properly. It needs to create a renaissance.
So what's
for Guildford? It's got to be public realm, there's got to be squares, it's got to be great to look at, and it's got to be great for the people who live in them to look out over the town. It's got to add vibrancy back to the town. We want to do, I mean, I don't know if North Street's going to be pedestrianised. Okay, there's an announcement the bus station's going to be that, fine, and we will need crossroads. But the key thing is, none of us can decide at the moment. We are best deciding when we see 3 or 4 different schemes, ideally by different architects. We only ever get from Guildford on every situation that at the end of the process they consult you on something and they say you can have any colour you like providing it's black. So they've already decided.
Okay, 9 stories high?
I think height is, I mean, obviously there's viability. The BT building is already about equivalent to 9 stories. I haven't got, I certainly wouldn't want to go higher than that, but I haven't got a fixation. It's what looks right. I mean, if you go to towns like Montpellier in France, very, very high, very dense, and they are exciting and they're vibrant because they've been designed well. I think we should be very careful about giving handcuffs in exactly the same way. We don't want to give handcuffs to the architect, to the developer, but in exactly the same way, the council shouldn't be making a decision on their own. I don't know, other than Jeff, I don't know how many of the elected councillors have got a background in doing development. And one other thing I would implore them to do is go and look at some of Barclay's schemes. I'm sure they'd organise it. Go and look at, tell us, I mean, a good question for us is, what towns and what schemes have we seen? Or what would we like to see in Guildford? And it's a real opportunity for Guildford to have a great town centre.
Okay. Last question. Okay. In a couple of sentences, what would you count as a success in North Street development?
I would count a success as lots of activity, great public realm at ground floor, but when you walk through, you feel absolutely thrilled and excited that Guildford's done something really special at last. And I also believe this developer can do it, but we need to help him along the way.
Okay. Karen?
I don't disagree with any of that. It seems to me that that is the obvious thing for any successful development. It's got to be something that has lots of different sorts of people living in it, and I completely agree about people wanting to downsize. That's why the loss of the Pegasus site was so disappointing. It must be somewhere that all different sorts of people feel very comfortable and safe, and it has to be very open and appealing to lots of different markets.
Yeah.
Okay. Funny enough, I think we're all singing from the same song sheet here. Yeah? We're all wanting the very best for Guildford, and we're all wanting a mix of units. We all want the greatest number of affordable housing. I'm delighted that John is going to downsize and move into the first penthouse. That's fabulous. And the market will be uplifted for his presence. The one thing we haven't discussed is there's a bus station will stay on site on Leapale Road. The council's proposing to spend £10 million to enable that. That's a contribution from the council. But just to put John's mind at rest as far as consultation is concerned, we discussed yesterday that it should be at least 4 or 5 months with a variety of schemes and a variety of ideas. I don't know what else we could do other than that, and that's proposed to be done. So just to conclude for me, if you like, I am totally optimistic. I'm delighted to be able to have a hand in bringing this scheme forward. I think it's vital we all keep on track, and I think it's deliverable now. Now that it's ceased of its own volition being a retail-led scheme, has become a residential-led scheme, it could actually work and can be made to work, and I think we should all work together to achieve that.
Again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank